Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is a recent epiphany I just had because I had a debate with some Hebrew Israelites who said they, you know, thought God was racist. So I literally spent the time debating if God was a racist and does God show favoritism versus Captain Tazariak and Captain Kataza on Cross the Line Radio. And what I realized is I had them in that debate narrowed down to the fact that I proved in that debate, and I can prove it again and again, that God doesn't show favoritism and God isn't racist. And out of the 783,137 words that are in the King James Bible, and that's in the 66 books that are in the Holy Bible, not the Apocrypha, because I don't subscribe to the Apocrypha, but what's in the 66 books of the Holy Bible, the 783,000 words, 137 words in the King James Version, there's not any words that are describing the Israelites, not their skin color, not how tall they are, not how short they are, not if they're fat, skinny, blue eyes, brown eyes, whatever. You're only going to get, as far as the description of any real Israelite goes, really, is Jesus Christ's feet being burnt bronze. And let me be clear, Jesus is black. Jesus is black. That's not a question. We're not debating that. That is a fact. There's no question on that. I know that from personal experience being saved. But what I can say is I figured out recently after this debate that at the end of the debate, I asked them, what are the physical characteristics of, being an Israelite? What book, chapter, verse can you show me that shows that blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, that 12 tribes chart that they all subscribe to, and I'm talking about all the One West camps, IUIC, Sakari, ISUPK, naming Sons of Jacob, Sons of Thunder, I mean, all these groups, GMS, whatever their, groups are, whatever their ideas are. There's too many of these groups to name. They're all parasites that popping up everywhere, but they're really, I don't know. Sorry for calling them parasites. That was not the greatest way to characterize what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is the ideology is parasitic. The ideology is unbiblical. I'm not going to call members people that I don't know and people that I'm, not in personal contact with. I'm not going to call them parasites. What I'm saying is the doctrine itself is parasitic because it's infecting the truth of the Bible. So, no member specifically being named here, but the doctrine itself needs to change. And I figured out after that debate, because there's not any verses where they could show you the physical characteristics of the Israelites. They can't defend it with any verses for physical description because there's colors in the Bible. I proved that in my debate, but there's no colors to describe the Israelites in any verses. So they have to go to the curses. And if you go to the curses in Deuteronomy, I just reread those the other day, and it's ridiculous to act like those curses have anything to do with the transatlantic slave trade. All those curses already occurred. And not only did they already occur, but they all occurred before the time of the prophet Jeremiah and the prophet Daniel, because both Daniel and Jeremiah said in their scriptures that God brought all the curses of the covenant that the Israelites broke. And if you look at a timeline of when Jeremiah and Daniel existed, if you Google it or whatever, you'll see that they both existed around 600 BC-ish. So that's 2,000 years prior to the transatlantic slave trade. So I'll show you those scriptures right now because those are great scriptures to have to rebuttal. Hey, when they say, well, yeah, we don't have any physical description of the Israelites, but the curses. If you go through and read the curses from Deuteronomy 28:15, where they begin, to 28:68, none of the curses apply to the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, the only verse that they attempt or can even try to attempt is the very last verse, which is 28:68. And it's an insane leap to make. And I'll even show that scripture also because it's such an insane leap to make, because what they're doing is they're changing Egypt to a metaphor. And besides changing Egypt to a metaphor, at the very last part of the verse, it says, you'll try to sell yourselves as slaves in this land of Egypt, but the people won't even buy you. So what are we saying here? We're saying that slaves weren't bought and sold in the transatlantic slave trade. So why is God saying in Deuteronomy 28:68, which I'm going to bring up right here and show everybody, the very last sentence of that verse says that the people aren't even going to buy you as slaves. And it's really saying, and if you'll see this if you go to any other version besides the 1611 King James, if you go to the modern King James, the new KJV or whatever, you'll see that the people were trying to sell themselves as slaves. That's what the curse is. And back in, the times of the Israelites, the word slave often was closer to what we would consider a modern day servant. So what God was really saying in 28:68 was, I'll take you back to the land of Egypt. You'll offer yourselves to be servants, and no one will buy you. It in no way construes going on a ship and going to America in the transatlantic slave trade. And the only other verse that I've heard that they will use is Deuteronomy 28:49, because it says, swoop down like an eagle in a far off nation. But then if you read that next verse and go to 28:50 and 51 and 52, it's clear that that country that swoops down like an eagle is invading the Israelites and taking their crops, taking their cattle. And we'll also take a look at those verses right now too. But before I take a look at those verses and then also show you the Jeremiah 11:7 and 11:8 verse that shows you that all the curses were brought, and I show you the Daniel 9:11 and 9:14 verses that show 9:11 to 9:14 verses that show you that God brought all the curses. So that's two prophets of God, Daniel and Jeremiah, both showing you that all the curses were already brought by the Father and Jesus Christ. So that was 2,000 years before the transatlantic slave trade, and I want them to give us 5 verses. I figured out that all they're going to do is say Deuteronomy 28:68. They can't go through the rest of those curses. If you read the rest of the curses in Deuteronomy 28:15 to 68, which I did last night twice, they don't apply, and the time frame doesn't apply either. There's curses where the Israelites will eat their young. That's described as occurring in the prophet Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 5, chapter 5. You'll see that there was such a famine in the land that God had the enemy take all the food and then no crops would grow. So people were literally eating their young. That happened in Ezekiel 5. That didn't happen in the transatlantic slave trade. That occurred, and it is described in the Bible as happening in Ezekiel 5. So if you go through these Deuteronomy curses, not only will you see that these curses don't even make sense, because God's saying he'll give people the plagues of the boils that he gave the Egyptians that the Egyptians experienced during the Exodus. If you go through Deuteronomy 28:15 to 68, you'll see that literally none of these verses apply to a modern day person saying that they're an Israelite because of these curses. So if you ask any of these camps, and this is what people just need to do, they need to simplify what we're doing in these discussions. We need to just ask them to prove to us with 5 verses. That's not a lot of verses. There's 31,102 verses in the 66 books of the Bible. I just said 31,102. If they can't provide 5 verses to show you they're Israelites, then the lie is evident. The lie is no longer hidden. The lie is no longer a roach in the corner in the dark. The lie is in the light, and everyone can see it, and nobody can hide from it. So this is the new thing everybody needs to do on their debates, on their platforms, when they're approaching these guys on the street, and they're getting harassed or getting told they're Esau and they're a terrible person and all this. Groups like Israel, I forgot about, but you ask them to show you 5 verses that prove that they're the Israelites. And what we're going to do now is I'll start off by taking us to the Jeremiah and Daniel verses, because those are important to have a rebuttal for when people try to tell you that they're, no, the curses are the reason that they're an Israelite. You can take them to these verses and show them. very clearly that God said he brought all the curses. And when God uses the word all, I don't think he's saying some. I think he meant he brought every single curse he promised. So we need to start having these scriptures ready to rebuttal these guys, and we will. And not only that, the new thing, like I said, will be to ask them to provide 5 scriptures to prove they're an Israelite, because they physically don't have any scriptures to prove that blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans are Israelites. There's none in the Bible. They can't go through the Bible and show you a scripture in any part of the Bible. I just did this discussion and this debate, and my opponents even admitted, Captain Tazariak and Captain Kataza admitted, there weren't any verses in the Bible to physically describe what the Israelites look like. And all of us who have read the Bible know this is true. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through this rebuttal, the Jeremiah rebuttal, and then we're also going to go through the Daniel rebuttal and showing you that all the curses were brought. And then we'll go to Deuteronomy and we'll go quickly through the curses and just show everybody who hasn't revisited Deuteronomy 28 in a long time that it's ridiculous that they try to claim any of those curses refer to the transatlantic slave trade, because when you start with Deuteronomy 28:15, where the curses begin, and you read all the way to 68, it's very clear that all these curses occurred in the Bible in other times, and it's even described by the other prophets. So here we'll go. If you want to start at the beginning, like I said, it's 11:7 where the verse starts, and then 11:8. But you could also start here because it's very clear Jeremiah is speaking on the covenant being broken. So we know when he's describing the covenant being broken, he's also going to be speaking on why the curses came or what curses came. So this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Listen to the terms of this covenant and tell them to the people of Judah and those who live in Jerusalem. Tell them that this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Cursed is the one who does not obey the terms of this covenant, the terms I commanded your ancestors when I brought them out of Egypt, out of the iron smelting furnace. I said, obey me and do everything I command you, and you will be my people, and I will be your God. So obviously we know those are the covenants that Moses told him in Deuteronomy. Right there, after he brought him out of Egypt. Then I will fulfill the oath I swore to your ancestors to give them the land flowing with milk and honey, the land you possess today, I answered. Amen, Lord. The Lord said to me, proclaim all these words in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem. Listen to the terms of this covenant and follow them. From the time I brought your ancestors up from Egypt until today, I warned them again and again, saying, obey me. So that's Jeremiah 11:7. 11:8 reads, but they did not listen or pay attention. Instead, they followed the stubbornness of their evil hearts. So I brought on them all the curses of the covenant that I had commanded them to follow, but they did not keep. So right there in 11:8, you have the words highlighted right there for everybody to see. All the curses. So when they say, well, I don't have any, physical description verses, but because you'll ask them for these 5 verses to show and demonstrate that they're an Israelite based on the Bible, considering there's 31,102 verses, asking somebody for 5 is obviously a very minimal request. So when they say they have proof because of the curses, you can ask them, well, why did God say he brought all the curses through Jeremiah in 600 BC-ish? And that even precedes 600 BC. But that's, Jeremiah was in around 600 BC. So you can read another verse or two, but that's, the main aspect of it. And, obviously goes on and describes a little bit about what their sins were afterwards too. So we can also see what he says in 11:9. But again, it's primarily all the curses of the covenant I commanded he brought on them. So I brought on them all the curses in 11:8. But then if you want to read another verse or two for some context, then the Lord said to me, there's a conspiracy among the people of Judah and those who live in Jerusalem. They have returned to the sins of their ancestors who refused to listen to my words. They have followed other gods to serve them. Both Israel and Judah have broken the covenant I made with the ancestors. So this is, again, just describing the reasoning why God brought the curses, because obviously God didn't just bring the curses. The Israelites were sinning. They were worshiping evil gods, and they aren't gods, evil idols. And, God obviously brought the curses for a reason. Therefore, this is what the Lord says: when I bring on them a disaster they can't escape, although they cry out to me, I will not listen. The towns of Judah and the people of Jerusalem will go and cry out to the gods whom they burn incense, but they will not help them when all the disasters strike. Help them at all when disaster strikes. You, Judah, have as many gods as you have towns, and the altars you have set up to burn incense to, that shameful god Baal, are as many as the streets of Jerusalem. Do not pray for this people or offer any petition for them, because I would not listen when they call me in the time of my distress. What is my beloved doing in my temple, as she with many others works out her evil schemes? Can consecrated meat avert your punishment? When you engage in wickedness, then you rejoice. Okay, so we get the the description afterwards of what the sins were, and that's why you take them to 11:8, and you can show them afterwards what the Israelites did. Again, I could continue to break down scripture for days, and just continue to go on. But the key point there is to have Jeremiah 11:8 for I start with 11:7, but that leads into 11:8 as the primary verse. And this is the second verse that you could show them all the curses were brought. Besides going, like I said, to other prophets and showing the curses that were brought. And obviously, we're all familiar with Jeremiah and the book of Lamentations, where Jeremiah is clearly talking about all the curses and the desolation that Israel has gone through because of all their sin. So, I mean, the book of Lamentations by Jeremiah is obviously a clear indication that God did bring the curses. And, again, Jeremiah 9:11 through 9:14 again will show us that God brought all the curses. So we'll start here. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned away, refusing to obey you. Therefore, the curses and sworn judgment written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out on us because we have sinned against you. So it can't be any clearer. When you ask them for, the reasons they're the Israelites, and they tell you, well, it's the curses. Well, you're going to ask them for 5 verses, and they're not going to be able to give you 5 verses. But when they do give you Deuteronomy 28:68, and if they do make a terrible attempt at 28:49, which is a really ridiculous attempt when you read verses 28, 50, 51, 52, 53, but you have in this right here the information that God's brought the curses already, because obviously it's written clearly here, the law of Moses being broken. You have fulfilled the words spoken against us and against our rulers by bringing on us great disaster. Under the whole heaven, nothing has ever been done like what has been done to Jerusalem, just as it is written in the law of Moses. Again, there's no confusion here. All this disaster has come on us. See? All this disaster. Yet we have not sought the favor of the Lord our God by turning from our sins and giving attention to your truth. The Lord did not hesitate to bring disaster on us, for the Lord our God is righteous in everything he does. Yet we have not obeyed him. So we see, right again, all this disaster. The words all. So we had Jeremiah saying all the curses have come. Then we have Daniel saying the same thing, clearly showing that the law of Moses was broken and God brought all the great disaster on them. Nothing like that had ever been done under heaven. And all this disaster has come on us, yet we have not sought the favor of the Lord our God from our sins and given attention to your truths. And, right here, you start with 9:11. Therefore, the curses and the sworn judgments written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out on us because we have sinned against you. So it's really just, the 9:11 through 14 just gives you a little bit of context. Obviously, I'm not going to harp on the word all in this one verse here, all this disaster that's come on us, because that's just more of a figure of speech, saying all the disaster. It's not like when in Jeremiah, he said all the curses in 11:8, which obviously was talking about all the curses. I'm not going to harp on the word all in 9:13. I'm not trying to mislead or misconstrue or manipulate scripture here. But what I am going to show is, 9:11. Therefore, the curses and sword judgments written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out on us because we have sinned against you. And then like I said, I go down to 9:14 because it just gives a little more context. But again, you tell them Jeremiah 11:7. Just revisit that quick. So you see 11:7 and 8. And that's where he says all the curses have been brought. Then you just saw in Daniel, all the curses, well, it says the curses were brought from breaking the law of Moses. Jeremiah 11:7, 11:8 is where it says all the curses. 11:8 specifically, because we have the word all the curses right here in 11:8. So those are two rebuttals. I mean, you can't really go wrong with Jeremiah 11:8, but if you want, you also show them that Daniel, just to back it up so they don't think it's just Jeremiah saying this and it doesn't apply. You show them Daniel also said it. So we all know Daniel is one of the most righteous men that ever lived. I mean, Jesus and the Father mentioned the fact that if Daniel, Noah, and Job were in certain places, in certain cities, they could only save themselves by their righteousness. I forget exactly where that's at, but I'll type it in right now and we can look for it. That's the beauty of the Blue Letter Bible. Type in Daniel, Job, and Noah, because there are times when God mentions Daniel, Job, and Noah as being only able to save themselves because he's using them as an example because they are so righteous. And it's in Ezekiel. And this is the verse I was referencing, Ezekiel 14:14. Even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they could only save themselves by their righteousness, declares the sovereign Lord. So again, this is in another time in Ezekiel when God is bringing curses. We know in the early Ezekiel, the Israelites also are getting these curses. So it's not just Jeremiah and Daniel where you can go for evidence that the Israelites received the curses for, breaking the covenant of the law of Moses, but you can go to Lamentations, you can go to Ezekiel, you can go to any of the prophets because they're all explaining what happened and the truth. And anybody that's paying attention when they're reading the Bible can tell that the Israelites were getting the curses. They were getting the plague. They were getting the sword. They were getting the what else are there? There's the plague, the sword. Oh yeah, there's being captured, and it's proof throughout. But either way, when Daniel says something, it's truth. When Noah says something, Job says something, it's truth. Anything in the Bible, is truth because everything is God breathed. So we have that. But now I want to go to Deuteronomy 28:68 and also just to the rest of Deuteronomy from 28:15 to 68 because I think it's important that we read all the curses. And we're not going to spend tons of time on every curse because we're just going to read the curses to see if they apply. So when somebody is asked, provide me 5 scriptures to show me you're an Israelite. So you can claim that you're an Israelite because you're black, Latino, or Native American, and you can tell white people they're Esau and they're not eligible for heaven and they're going to be your slave. And all you ask as an apologist is, hey, okay, that sounds reasonable. Show me the 5 scriptures that prove you're an Israelite. And we all know it's a lie, so that's why these 5 scriptures don't exist. But I've simplified all the debates we have to have and all the discussions we can have with these guys. We can really just start over. Instead of debating, is salvation for everyone and all these things that we debate with these guys, we can just start over and say, prove to me the lie you're telling is true. Prove to me that you're an Israelite. Just give me 5 verses in the Bible out of the 31,102 verses in the 66 books of the Holy Bible. Show me. Okay? So let's start. Like I said, we already have rebuttals for if they do say curses because we'll show them that, well, God brought all the curses 2,000 years before you said that these curses are the transatlantic slave trade. But Let's just see. Let's go through each of these curses from Deuteronomy 28:15 to 68, and we'll see which ones apply to the transatlantic slave trade. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God, and I'm going to go all the way from 15 to 68, so bear with me. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on each. I'll stop and talk about one that might have a possibility, but we'll also go through these quickly here. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. Did that happen to the Israelites? Yes, it did. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. And I'm not going to go through and say, did everything happen? Because that's redundant. I'll let everybody think for themselves and read. The fruit of your womb will be cursed, and the crops of your lands, and the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks. So obviously we know the slaves didn't have calves and herds and lambs and flocks. So this is obviously preceding anything that could ever be construed as related to the transatlantic slave trade, these curses. You can't say this is related to the transatlantic slave trade at all. This is obviously prior, because it's still when the Israelites still have their herds. You'll be cursed when you come in, and cursed when you go out. The Lord will send curses, confusion, and rebuke in everything you put your hand to, until you are destroyed and come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him. The Lord will plague you with diseases until he has destroyed you from the land you are entering to possess. So this is obviously happening in Canaan, the land that the Israelites were entering to possess, that was supposed to be flowing with milk and honey if they abided by. And we could go to the beginning of Deuteronomy 28 here, where there's blessings for obedience. But again, these are the curses that we're concentrating on. So if you want to see the blessings that the Israelites would have gotten, you could just go to the beginning, 28, 1 through 15. And I'll just scroll up quickly to show you that. The blessings for obedience. And that's, what could have been, should have been, shoulda, woulda, coulda, if you did everything properly. But you could also read the blessings to help you understand if the curses apply to these people who try to claim that the curses are saying they're Israelites, because the blessings are also specific to what the blessings would be for. So they also can give you some context here. But for now, we're just going to keep running through these. All right. We're here. The Lord will strike. Let's scroll down. The Lord will strike you with wasting disease, with fever and inflammation, with scorching heat and drought, with blight and mildew, which will plague you until you perish. The sky over your head will be bronze. And out of fairness, in my mind, if I'm going to say anything, a Native American is about the only person that can make this argument that this curse may be applying to them, because we all know the Native Americans got all sorts of sicknesses and plagues from the conquistadors and all the people that were conquering their land in America. But again, go through these, see if you think they already happened, if they're applying to, Israelites or people in a different time, because we also have to keep in mind a timeline here. And, we can't say something that people got plagues all sorts of times in history. The Native Americans weren't the only people to get smallpox. They obviously received it from people that already had it. So there's obviously ways to manipulate scripture and distort things, but just out of fairness, you'll also present things that, okay, if you want to go in a direction, here's something you could go in a direction. Not a great way to go about it, because we can show that Israelites went through these things too in the scriptures, but okay, it's there. The sky over your head will be bronze, the ground beneath you iron. The Lord will turn the rain of your country into dust and powder. It will come down from the skies until you are destroyed. That didn't happen in the transatlantic slave trade. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but flee from them in seven, and you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. So this is about them losing wars. So obviously, again, I'm not going to be redundant about saying this doesn't apply to the transatlantic slave trade. We'll just stop at times when we can even make an argument that any of these curses could apply. That's what I did with the possibility of saying plagues could apply to Native Americans. Your carcasses will be food for all the birds and wild animals, and there will be no one to frighten them away. So we know all these curses happen too in Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Lamentations. All the prophets tell about these curses happening to the Israelites. The Lord will afflict you with boils of Egypt and with tumors, festering sores, and the itch from which you can't be cured. And these are obviously horrible curses. Horrible. But I mean, the Israelites, the evil they did was horrible. Worshipping foreign evil idols and sacrificing their children in the fire. Not going to say, all the things they did, but I mean, evil. Sacrificing your children to evil idols, worshipping idols. At midday, you will grope about like a blind person in the dark. You will be unsuccessful in everything you do. Day after day, you will be oppressed and robbed, with no one to rescue you. You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her. You will build a house, but you will not live in it. You will plant a vineyard, but you will not begin to enjoy its fruit. So this is essentially just telling us that, the Israelites are going to be doomed. Their lives are going to go from peace, prosperity, and joy to, basically having Murphy's Law, where everything they plan to do is going to go wrong to the extreme. Obviously, to the extreme. All right, we're at 28:31 now. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will eat none of it. Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you and will not be returned. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and no one will rescue them. So again, these curses right here, you're clearly still in Israel. You're not in a foreign land. You still have livestock. You still have your cattle, your sheep, your ox, and the enemy's in your land, and they're taking it right in front of your eyes. Your sons and daughters will be given to another nation, and you will wear out your eyes watching for them day after day, powerless to lift a hand. Okay, so this is a verse right here that, we're going to try to say this is something to prophesize about slavery. And it clearly is prophesizing about slavery of some sort. But when and where? And this is why it's important to remember we have Jeremiah 11:7 and 8. And we have Daniel 9:11 through 14. We also have all the other chapters of the prophets and their stories telling what's happening, where the Israelites are in slavery, how they're in slavery in Babylon and Assyria under Nebuchadnezzar and other foreign leaders, how the Assyrians and the Babylonians have them in slavery. So when you read a verse like this, you got to ask yourself the timeline. This is being written, 1500 BC-ish with Moses. When do these curses come? Do they come, in 800 years, 500 years, 600 years after when the prophets tell us they did? Or do they come 3,000 years later? A people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce, and you will have nothing but cruel oppression all your days. So again, this demonstrates they're still in Israel. You're still in your land farming, but your crops are getting plundered. The sights you see will drive you mad. The Lord will afflict your knees and legs with painful boils that can't be cured, spreading from the soles of your feet to the top of your head. So that's just like what Job went through, painful sores all over their bodies. I mean, these curses are terrible, obviously. The Lord will drive you. And also keep in mind, this is all under the law of Moses. And this shows us that God had such strict rules where he would bless people overwhelmingly, but he would also discipline them and have curses on them overwhelmingly if they broke their oaths and they didn't do what the Lord, they had promised to the Lord, and they broke their vows. So this is another reason why sending Jesus Christ was the ultimate sacrificed by the Father because he saw how human beings couldn't handle following and abiding by his rules and laws and his righteousness and his standards. And he sent his only son as a sacrifice and also a path, a way for us to receive the ultimate salvation that he wanted to give us all from the original covenant. The original covenant was meant so everyone could receive the blessing of heaven and receive it. That's why Jesus came and he said, repent, the kingdom of heaven is near. So seeing all these curses is just another reminder of the great mercy of the Father in Jesus, because he had to find a solution, because he realized that human beings are wicked. They're going to go off and worship foreign evil gods. They're going to sacrifice their children. They're going to still murder and steal. They're going to break all the laws. And the Father said, I have to find something to save my people and to save people in general. And what did he do? A plan that he had ordained before the world even existed. He sent his only son and sacrificed him. And Jesus Christ didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world, just like it is said in John 3:17. You will become a thing of horror, a byword, and an object of ridicule among all the peoples where the Lord will drive you. You will sow much seed in the field, but you will harvest little because locusts will devour it. So again, the curse is the locusts coming to their farmland. You will plant vineyards and cultivate them, but you will not drink the wine or gather the grapes because worms will eat them. Again, they have vineyards. This is very, very much prior to any slavery and getting sent to a foreign land. There's vineyards. They're planting their own vineyards, but the worms will eat the grapes. You will have olive trees throughout your country, but you will not use them for oil because the olives will drop off. You will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them because they will go into captivity. Okay, so right here we see again, this is another verse that is vague, and it's just talking about somebody being in captivity. So if you ask them for 5 verses, you can see so far we're already 25 curses in. They don't have much to work with. So when you ask them for 5, they're probably going to grab something like this and try to distort it. I'm just trying to assume what they're going to do. I mean, they don't have many choices here. I mean, half of them are just telling you that this is happening in their land. But again, this is also by showing you that it's happening in this land that you're going to I think I missed 36 here. The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. They will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. Okay, so this is one I missed, but again, this is when Israel still has a king, and they're going to go into another nation, which we know they did. This doesn't have to mean transatlantic slave trade America. Matter of fact, it doesn't mean that. It means they went into another nation within their region, within the Middle East, within, Assyria, Babylonia, and all those nations around them. So they're also saying that they're going to be worshiping those foreign gods. So we know that happened in, Babylon and all the other, I don't want to keep saying the same places, but, we know that they had their idols and their foreign gods, but we know there were also some good Israelites that stood firm in their faith, like Daniel, Abednego, Meshachar, and I'm trying to think of the fourth one's name, that they went into the furnace with Daniel. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. The story of Daniel, when they were trying to get them to worship the idols in Babylon, and they wouldn't. But let me go through this and continue on, not get sidetracked too much. So again, this is a very vague verse, and we know the captivity of the Israelites did happen. Maybe if you ask them for 5 verses out of the 31,000 verses in the Bible, maybe they'll try to make that happen. I don't know. Again, they'll have trouble when you bring up Jeremiah 11:8, Daniel 9:11. But hey, let them try. Swarms of locusts will take over all your trees and crops of your land. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. See, this is important, though, when they do try to take this verse, like your sons and daughters will not, you will not keep them. They will go into captivity. Because all you got to do is keep going into context. And you can see that the next verse is saying that locusts are going to take over their crops and foreigners will rise and take over, reside among you and will rise higher and higher while you sink lower and lower. So, yeah, your sons and daughters are going to be taken away, but you're still going to be in the land where you have your farm crops, and you're still going to be in your land where foreigners can rise above you. So you got to keep a timeline and a context. And it's clear that the parents aren't in a foreign land themselves. It's just the children that got taken. So you again can't really argue slave trade. And again, it's a ridiculous leap. But when you ask for 5 verses out of 31,000 and they really struggle to even find 2 or 3, they're going to try something. So I'm just trying to predict. Again, they'll be lying and failing, but let's just try to predict. I'm trying to give them a chance here. We're going from 28:15 to 68, and I haven't found much. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. So again, the Lord tells you all the curses are going to come. And obviously that's an important precursor, foreshadowing here for Jeremiah 11:8, when he says all the curses did come. So again, we'll keep timelines here. So when they try to take something like 41 here, you can show them 45 and then show them Jeremiah 11:8 and then Daniel 9:11 that all the curses came. They will be a sign and wonder to you and your descendants forever, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and glad in time of prosperity. Therefore, in hunger and thirst and nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies of the Lord sent against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has you destroyed. So I guess right here, what they'll try to do is they'll try to take iron yoke on your neck until he has you destroyed, and they'll try to use that as a symbol for slavery, because again, you're going to have to try to manipulate the verse in some manner. But again, the timeline is not going to work for you, because right here, this is again what they'll try to do. They'll try to take this eagle swooping, which is just a metaphor, and they'll try to have that represent America, because I've heard them try to do that before. So let's see if that can fit in their narrative here. This is where they're going to try to paint their narrative. So let's pay attention to 28:48 down. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand. So this nation comes from far away, and they're going to swoop down like an eagle. A fierce-looking nation, without respect for the old or for the young. Okay, so now we're describing this nation. They will devour the young of your livestock. Okay, so this is the word "they" here is referring to the nation that swooped like an eagle, and the nation that has no respect for the old or pity for the young. This is the same nation. They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new wine, or olive oil, nor any calves or herds of your herds or lambs of your flocks until you are ruined. So this isn't adding up to the transatlantic slave trade, because the nation's, again, taking the livestock and the crops of the land. So this would mean the Israelites still had livestock and crops. So they're not on a foreign land. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land. Okay, so this same nation that's swooping like an eagle is the same nation that put the iron yoke around your neck and swoop down like an eagle. The iron yoke around your neck, just like we know, like when Solomon's son Rehoboam took over, and he asked his advisors if he should put a light yoke or a heavy yoke, and he got bad advice, and they put a heavy yoke. And we know Jesus says, "My yoke is light, my burden is gentle, but my yoke is light." The iron yoke here is obviously more of a metaphor than a literal iron thing on your neck, but we know how they have to try to distort things, but let's just keep in mind what reality is and what God's actually describing. So that nation comes like an eagle. They take over your land. So they invade your land. Okay? They invade your land. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls on which you trust fall down. They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. So the same eagle swooping nation with the iron yoke, which is just a heavy burden, they're taking all the cities after they destroy the crops and the livestock. Because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, so it's a siege. So you're still in your land of Israel, in the cities throughout the land you had with fortified walls. So what are they going to say when you say, well, the enemy's attacking where you have your fortified walls? The fortified walls obviously mean that you're still in your countries, your cities in Israel. Because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you'll eat the fruit of the womb. And this is important for a timeline because it tells you, just like in Lamentations when Jeremiah says it, and just like in Ezekiel 5, because of the suffering your enemy inflicts on you, so this enemy that swooped down like an eagle, that put the iron yoke on them, leads the Israelites to such desolation that they have to eat their own young. You will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you. And my battery's getting low and I don't have my charger with me, so I'm going to try to rush through this. But this shows us right here that this timeline, when they eat their young, occurs. And that contradicts any argument for any prior verse to mean anything other than curses that happened to the true Israelites in the Israelite nations and the areas around them, because the fruit of the womb eating, because of the desolation, proves that. Because God says in Ezekiel, this is something that I will do in Ezekiel 5. You can read it in Ezekiel 5. God says this is something that will happen only once. It's a thought that never crossed my mind and will never cross it again. The eating of the young. So you can read that in Ezekiel 5. Even the most gentle and sensitive man among you will have no compassion on his brother or his wife he loves or his surviving children, and he will not give to one of them any of the flesh of his children that he's eating. So this shows you that they're eating their children. This isn't the transatlantic slave trade. This isn't Israel. These are events that happened only one time. The Father doesn't lie. Jesus doesn't lie. The word is true. And he says this is a thought that only didn't cross my mind and won't happen again. You can read it in Ezekiel 5. It'll be all that he has left because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of all your cities. And I'm sure also if I read Lamentations with Jeremiah, I'd also see similar stuff. Just check Ezekiel 5 and Lamentations. The most gentle and sensitive woman among you, so sensitive and gentle that she would not venture to touch the ground with the sole of her foot, will begrudge the husband she loves and her own son or daughter. The afterbirth from her womb, the children she bears, for in dire need she intends to eat them. So again, these verses are all talking from 53 to 57 about these curses, and because of what that enemy that was the eagle did, that had the iron yoke. So the enemy that had the iron yoke, right here from 48, and swoop like an eagle, those are things that they're going to try to use when you ask them for 5 verses in this entire 31,000 verse Bible. 31,100 verse Bible. When you ask them for 5 simple verses, they're going to try to take these. But I've already described and interpreted for you with a timeline why that makes no sense. And a significant issue they have to make their argument is, well, when did Israelites eat their young in the transatlantic slave trade? Because we see it in the Bible. We see it in Ezekiel 5. We see it in Lamentations. And we see God describing this as a consequence of the nation that swooped like an eagle invading them in a land with the Israelites still having their high fortified walls. So the Israelites aren't in a foreign land. They're in their own cities. And he will not give to any one of them the flesh of the children he is eating. It will be all. And again, the Father said this is something he never thought of and will never do again when you read that in Ezekiel. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, that this curse doesn't happen again. This is a one-time thing. The most gentle and sensitive woman among you. Okay, we already read that. My battery's dying, so I want to try to get to 68. I'm probably not going to get there. It's probably going to die right short. So we'll have to just revisit that. But if you do not carefully follow the words of the law which are written in the book, do not revere this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God. The Lord will send fearful plagues on you. Okay, my battery's very low. All right. I'm back. All right. It looks like we have somebody in the chat. Hebrew Israelites Holland. So this guy's trying to tell me I need him. All right. I'm back now. So we're going to keep breaking down the curses. But we'll also drop the link for this guy if he wants. So let's make sure we drop the link in case Holland wants to join the discussion here. Here's the link. Everybody can see. I am putting it in the chat. So please feel free to hit the link if you would like to join the discussion. Please hit the link. If you want to join the show. So yeah, I will always invite any of these critics. The link will always be in the chat on my channel. We will not dodge any critics or counter arguments because we can defend what we're saying with the truth. So I'm going to try to edit out that little time where my computer died. I apologize. Let's get back to it where we were. I'm glad I got it plugged in now. Now I can continue to go through these scriptures and not rush. So we'll get back. We'll also be looking at, like I said, these verses where the Israelites ate their children, because that's important for our timeline. And it's also important to understand that God said it's something that didn't cross his mind and will never cross his mind again, because it was such a last resort for a way to try to teach the Israelites, like, you have to stop sacrificing your children in fire. So don't think God is doing these things because he's a cruel God. God tries to show people in whatever way they need for it to get through their heads. And unfortunately, for most of us, it's usually something extreme for us to learn a lesson. So when you're sacrificing your children and you're worshiping other gods and you're sacrificing them in fire and your children are dying and burning in fire, and then the Father and Jesus are welcoming them in heaven, and you have to think, how can I stop these people from doing this evil and wickedness? Yes, in God's ultimate wisdom, he figured out, I will do this act that is despicable to myself, but it's a necessary, not evil, but a necessary consequence for these Israelites, because what will happen is this will occur, and then all the generations, they'll tell each other what occurred. And that will make every generation after this value their children, value their lives, and not be sacrificing them and worshiping evil gods. Not even gods, idols, fake gods, non-gods, idols. Okay, so back here, the afterbirth from her womb, and the children she bears, for in her dire need she intends to eat them secretly because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of the cities. So again, you can't claim this is transatlantic slave trade time because the cities are getting sieged. If you do not carefully follow all the words of this law which are written in the book, and do not revere this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, Jesus Christ, and the Father, God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Lord will send fearful plagues on you and on your descendants, harsh and prolonged disasters, severe and lingering illness. He will bring on you all the diseases of Egypt that you dreaded. They will cling to you. The Lord will also bring on you every kind of sickness and disaster not recorded in this book of the law until you are destroyed. So he's telling them they're going to have all sorts of diseases and sicknesses that weren't even written. We went down a little far, but as you can tell, we went from all the way to Deuteronomy 28:15, and we're almost at the end here. You are as numerous as the stars in the sky. You were as numerous as the stars in the sky, but will be left but few in number, because you did not obey the Lord your God. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations. So this is where they're going to have to try to start to tell us this story. They're going to have to start. We've already gone from Deuteronomy 28:15 all the way down to 64 here. We've already dismissed whatever desperate, vague verse they could try to manipulate by the timeline and what the prophet Jeremiah and Daniel will say, and also just the clear location of where things are occurring and the timeline. But let's see what they can do here, because this is where they're going to start. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations. So at least they have all nations in their favor when you ask them for 5 verses to prove they're Israelites. At least every nation on earth is covered. From one end of the earth to the other, there you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. Okay, but see, now this is a big problem, because they're going to worship Jesus Christ in the transatlantic slave trade. I think anybody that's a historian that's familiar with the transatlantic slave trade is going to tell you that they're worshiping Jesus Christ. They're going to even tell you that the people that enslaved the people used the Bible to enslave the people. They use the verses written by Paul in his letters that say, be subservient to your master. If you're a slave, obey him. That's how you can worship God better. And I'm paraphrasing there. But we all know that Christianity, which is based upon the Father's only Son, his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, is the religion that the slave owners used in the transatlantic slave trade. I've seen them even use the fact that the ship itself, one of the first ships, was named after Jesus. So nobody's going to deny that Christianity was the religion in the transatlantic slave trade locations in America. So how does this verse 64 fit? Because it says, there you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. So in these nations, all the nations from one end to the earth that they're scattered in, they're going to be worshiping idols. They're not going to be worshiping the true living God, Jesus Christ. They're not going to be worshiping the Son of God, who is God with the Father, Jesus Christ. They're going to be worshiping wood and stone idols, gods made of wood and stone. And the transatlantic slave trade is undebatably under the religion of Christianity, which we know is the fulfillment of this Bible, is God's plan. So you can't use 64, even though it has a couple good key words that you'd like to use if you want to be a deceiver, all nations and from one end to the earth. You can't use it because of the worship of foreign gods, worship of other gods, gods of wood and stone. Neither you nor your ancestors have known. Okay, so I beat that point to death, that the transatlantic slave trade is Christianity, and that doesn't fit. Among those nations, you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary, with longing and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread both night and day, never sure of your life. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening, and an evening, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. Okay, so I'm down to the very last verse in Deuteronomy. And so far, I haven't found one verse that can be used to prove that these people, these blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans in America are the Israelites because of these curses. So maybe there's some curses somewhere besides Deuteronomy that they'll use when you ask them out of the 31,102 verses in the Bible to show that they're Israelites, that they'll go to besides Deuteronomy 28:15 through 68. But maybe let's see if this is their powerful verse. This is the verse that they always cite first. So this is the powerful one. So let's read this one, the very last one. Deuteronomy 28:68. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Okay, so in order to make this apply to the transatlantic slave trade, All we have to do is change the location that God is explicitly saying. We know there's words in Hebrew for slavery. God uses them in other situations. He uses them in verses in this exact declaration. There's actually places, as we saw earlier, where I believe the sons and daughters will be slaves. If I'm remembering correctly, that verse where the sons and daughters are in a foreign land, at least. Let's see. I don't know. All I know is what the point is, what I was trying to say is there's a word for slavery in Hebrew, and God doesn't have to use a metaphor. He doesn't have to say the land of Egypt. So why is God saying, you know, Egypt? And why does he not mean Egypt? Why does he mean slavery and not Egypt? That's the first problem we have here. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem. You're changing a location that God gave into a metaphor. But let's play along with their logic and go with it. So let's say that's okay, let's say this is a metaphor. The Lord will send you back in ships to slavery. On a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves. Okay, I don't know how much of the transatlantic slave trade I remember, but I don't remember the slaves volunteering themselves to be slaves. And like I said, this goes back to the fact, and we also see, which is interesting if you want to really look at it, because it was funny. I was just looking for the word slaves in another verse, but the word slaves is in this verse. It's in the same verse they're referencing here, 28:68. So the Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey. So let's replace Egypt with slavery, like they said, and see if it makes sense that the word slaves is down here. The Lord will send you back. Let's see if it makes more sense if it's Egypt, and then we'll try it with slavery. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Okay, now let's change it to slaves and see if that slaves there makes sense. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey. Excuse me. I'm reading it as God actually wrote it. The Lord will send you back in ships to slavery on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves. Okay, I guess that could still work. But no one will buy you. So no one bought slaves in the transatlantic slave trade. I have vivid memories of what I've seen is in movies and other stuff in history that slaves are put on auction blocks and people bought them. So why is God saying, but no one will buy them? No one will buy you. But no one will buy you. And I've already looked at this verse in the original King James version, like I said, to try to figure out, because like I said, in the NIV here, it's really clear that when God says, there you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, the slaves in the transatlantic slave trade weren't offering themselves. And what this means to me when I'm reading this verse, and what I think God actually was trying to imply with this verse is, because of all these curses and all the desolation that occurred, all the other countries invading Israel and so forth, that the Israelites were so desperate just to survive, just to find food, just to get a job. And like I said, the Hebrew word for slave is a lot closer to what we would consider a servant, or in our modern days, having a job, maybe a bad job, just a minimum wage job or something, But obviously, I'm not going to go to that extreme and say that's apples to apples. But what I will say is that the Hebrew idea of slavery, the word slavery, is closer to servant. And we do have to pay attention to that, because when we see the word slave, we always think American, slavery, transatlantic slavery. But in reality, if you read this verse in its context, and these people, these Israelites, are offering yourselves for sale to your enemy as slaves, it is a much closer thing to applying for a job or offering to be a servant, because the verse finishes but no one will buy you. But like I said, I'm going to go to the King James version, and I'll first go to the New King James version to show you that the more modern translations still more closely resemble what I just read to you in the NIV in 2868. So this is the New King James version, but then I will go to the 1611 version. But I don't like the 1611 version. I don't think the Shakespearean vernacular language represents at all what these people in Israel were talking thousands of years prior. So I don't know why that argument even exists to this day. I mean, why would something with a limited amount of scholarship in 1611 speaking clearly in the vernacular that is not popular today, or was the vernacular used in Israel, why would that be more accurate? I mean, we have the internet nowadays and all sorts of documents. We have Dead Sea Scrolls that were found later on. We have all sorts of different scholars from different countries able to contribute to these new biblical translations. Why would the one or two scribes, or I'm not gonna, don't quote me on that. I'm not a historian on the biblical historicity yet, but why would those limited amount of scribes and the Jewish people that helped make the King James Bible in 1611 be more precise than anybody else? But regardless of that, they're not saying anything that different. It's just a little harder to understand. I just want to make that point overall, that I don't agree with, the King James version being a superior version. But this is the New King James version, so it's still a King James version, but let's see how it's, still closely related to what I just read, my translation in the NIV. And the Lord will take you back to Egypt in ships. By the way which I said to you, you shall never see it again. And there you shall be offered for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. So in the New King James Version, as we see, you're still getting offered as slaves, but no one will buy you. It still has, no matter what. This is the New King James Version. It still has, but no one will buy you. And everything else is very similar here too. The only thing different is, and there you shall be offered for sale, when in my NIV translation, it said, you will offer yourself for sale. So that's a slight difference, but let's just go to the King James Version that a lot of these groups subscribe to see if maybe that's why their version's so different. Let's see if it says anything so different. Because I remember reading the other day and it still had that, but no one will buy you at the end. And I think that's pretty important. I think it's very important for the context of understanding Deuteronomy 28:68. I think the fact that God still ends here in the 1611 King James Bible with the words, no one will buy you, definitely is an indication that we're not talking about the transatlantic slave trade, because we know slaves were bought there. So here it is. And this is in their KJV 1611 version. Again, with the vernacular of Shakespeare at the time that I don't like. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. And that's a clear example, that sentence right there, that this is why I don't read that version of the Bible, because I think if you're trying to understand what is actually written in the Bible, you can't tell me that Jesus Christ and King David and Abraham and all these people thousands of years prior to 1611 in a totally different part of the world. They're not in Europe, they're in Northern Africa, they're in the Middle East. They're speaking in this vernacular. I mean, this is a very unique vernacular that is just in England and Europe and Shakespearean and very annoying and confusing. I mean, by the way whereof I spake unto thee? I mean, what does that mean? Who speaks that language nowadays? That's not what they spoke in Israel. By the way whereof I spake unto thee. No, that's specific. That's vernacular to England. But let's finish the verse and then I'll go on my tangent. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen. So again, it's closer to the New King James Version where it says you'll be offered, and in the NIV version it said you'll offer yourselves, essentially. But still, let's continue on. There ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. But whatever a bondman and a bondwoman is, essentially slaves, I'd assume. Again, I have the word slaves in the modern translation, so I don't know. We're talking, like I said, about the vernacular of the KJV and calling slaves bondmen and bondwomen. I mean, isn't it better in the newer translations just to have the word slave here? Because do we call slaves bondmen and bondwomen? But that is what it's referencing. So again, this is a totally kind of different subject. Maybe I'll do a video on this, but I'd have to do some more research too. But I don't like the King James Version, and I think it confuses people. I don't think it helps them understand what God's trying to say. I think there's way more information nowadays. Modern scholars got together and did better translations of the Bible, and you shouldn't hold to the fact that this is closer to what was actually spoken, because it isn't, because it's closer to what was spoken in Europe at the time and the vernacular that they used. Because instead of saying a slave or whatever the Hebrew word would be for slave, they used the word bondman because they were trying to put it into medieval terms that they could understand. So we'll finish the verse here. And I'm sorry I spoke throughout. It's just a couple sentences and I went on my own spiels throughout it, but I'm just pointing things out that, I see total errors with subscribing to the fact that the KJV is some sort of biblical authority, because it isn't. But even in this crazy vernacular that Shakespeare speaks, and no man shall buy you. And we know Shakespeare, I've heard at least, was friends with King James. So, again, this is just the vernacular that they spoke. And whoever translated it was obviously going to break it down the way the king, not his partner or his friend, but the king understood it. So whoever's translating, they're trying to appease the king. So they're going to make it in terms that the king can understand. And no man shall buy you. Okay, so this is their most powerful verse. We went through Deuteronomy 28:15 through 68, every single curse. This is the curse. This is the supposed curse they're going to use when you ask them for 5 verses to prove they're Israelites. Why does it say, even in their King James Version here, 16:11, and no man shall buy you? And again, it still says Egypt in this version too, but it refers to slaves being bondmen and bondwomen. So, I mean, I think if they were going to use slave, they could use that in this aspect here too. So again, I still hold to the fact that God wasn't confused when he used the word Egypt. He actually literally meant Egypt. And I think that was symbolic to the fact that he brought all the curses of the Egyptians on the Israelites. So he was doing this in a symbolic manner to show them that they would return to the land of Egypt in desperation. So I think that did have like actual meaning in the curse. That's just my interpretation. It's obviously not positively what happened, but I think it is possible that God did have a purpose for using Egypt in this very last verse, just as like a way to remind them, like, hey, I can take you back to where I found you type of thing. But that's my own interpretation. You can run with it what you want. And it still says no man shall buy you. So unless slaves weren't getting bought and sold, we have a problem. We have a serious problem saying this was the transatlantic slave trade, because this sounds more like people desperately starving and looking for work because their crops have been destroyed and they've been desolated by being invaded and their land being taken over, their cities and all their vineyards and everything being plundered, and them trying to get work, and no man shall buy you. So they're going to have to explain that. But again, we also, besides all this, I'm going back to the language I speak, because I don't speak by the way whereof I spake unto thee. I don't speak that. And I don't know why people want to try to read the Bible in a more complicated version that's not closer to the actual text. There's definitely more scholars today than there were in 1611. They didn't have the internet back then. So I don't know. We can also get into the blessings for obedience and try to see like how that would also help paint a picture for us on, if the curses applied or not. But again, we're just going to take a quick look here at when you ask just like the banner on my screen says, ask I'm not sharing my screen this entire time. I apologize, people. I apologize. After my thing went down. Oh shit. My buddy's here. Israelite Camp Killer. Sorry, man. I didn't see you, bro. I don't see the comments when I was on my tangent there. Here's my guy. This is my friend. He's doing great work. Definitely go follow his channel, Israelite Only Camp Killer. Hey, I'm live. There's the link, Israelite Only Camp Killer. Sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen. Hit it if you're still watching, my buddy. Love to link with this guy. If you don't subscribe to his channel, subscribe as soon as you can. It's IOCK, Israelite Only Camp Killer. He's way better at editing than me. He does a great job breaking down these so-called Israelite videos. And he definitely gives you a lot of great information that will edify everybody there. Hit that link if you're still around, Israelite Only Camp Killer. And you can get on here and you can, give your breakdowns too, because I'm sure you got some insight that the people need to hear, because I've seen your videos and I'm a huge fan. And we're both trying to get people on the same page. So there's the StreamYard link for Israelite Only Camp Killer, or if this other critic of mine is Hebrew Israelite Holland, so he must be from Holland or something. I don't know. Who knows with these guys? But he was talking some stuff in the chat, so the link was in there for him too. But again, here's from Deuteronomy 28:15, and the curses for disobedience. We'll go through it quickly. I got to try to keep my other page open. So if my friend here, Israelite Only Camp Killer, hits the link, if you hit the link, I'll definitely add you to the stream. So there's the link. And just hit the link if you're still around, Israelite Only Camp Killer. I'm glad you got to see some of this, because I know you're going to make a video and use the content yourself, because this is what we need to do. We need to put them to the test instead of debating, who is salvation for, and, the virgin birth, and is Jesus God? And, those are all obviously very important things, especially is Jesus God. We still need to be talking about that and debating that, because no matter what, if these people come out of this doctrine, they still need to become aware that Jesus Christ is God with the Father, because that's the most paramount thing any of us can believe for our faith. Jesus is the way to the Father. But Deuteronomy 28:15. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I am giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed, and the crops of your land, and the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks. You will be cursed when you come in, and cursed when you go out. The Lord will send on you curses, confusion, and rebuke in everything you put your hand to, until you are destroyed and come to a sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him. The Lord will plague you with diseases until he has destroyed you from the land you are entering to possess. The Lord will strike you with wasting disease, with fever, inflammation, with scorching heat, and drought, with blight and mildew, with plague until you perish. The sky over your head will be bronze, the ground beneath you iron. The Lord will turn rain of your country into dust and powder. It will come down from the skies until you are destroyed. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but flee from them in seven, and you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on the earth. Your carcasses will be food for all the birds and the wild animals. No, and there will be no one to frighten them away. 9:30 last time. The Lord will afflict you with the boils of Egypt, and with tumors, festering sores, and the itch from which you can't be cured. The Lord will inflict you with madness, blindness, and confusion of mind. At midday, you will grope about like a blind person in the dark. You'll be unsuccessful in everything you do. Day after day, you will be oppressed and robbed, with no one to rescue you. And again, I'm just going through all these one last time, just so we can see if any of them stick out, and especially fit into timelines. You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her. You will build a house, but no one will live in it. You will plant a vineyard, but you will not begin to enjoy its fruit. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will eat none of it. Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you and not be returned. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and no one will rescue it. Let me just check right here to make sure, because I'm not looking at the YouTube. If you hit the link, anybody hits the link, IOCK, especially my fellow apologists, try to get you on. So I'm just checking back and forth there. And all right. Here it is. I don't know if my screen's still shared. Okay. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will eat none of it. Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you and not be returned. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and no one will rescue them. Your sons and daughters will be given to another nation, and you will wear out your eyes watching for them day after day, powerless to lift a hand. Okay, so that, like I said, we're already from 15 to 32. This is the first start where anybody can try to start to manipulate things, because there's clearly nothing they can manipulate before that. However, what we see right afterwards is that you're going to be stuck in the land. And it says, a people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce, and you will have nothing but cruel oppression all your days. So you're still in your land here. So your sons and daughters have been taken to another nation, just like we know they were in Babylon, Assyria, and whatever other nations are around the Israelites. But your land is still producing crops. The sights you see will drive you mad. The Lord will afflict your knees with painful boils that can't be cured, spreading from the soles of your feet to the top of your head. The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to your ancestors. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. So again, when they try to say that this has anything to do with slavery, transatlantic slavery, because a nation unknown is used to you or your ancestors, there you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. You have to remember that the transatlantic slave trade, they were using Christianity, which is the fulfillment of the Bible. So you cannot use this verse to try to say that you're a Hebrew Israelite. You'll become a thing of horror, a byword, and an object of ridicule among the peoples, where the Lord will drive you. You will sow much seed in the field, but you will harvest little, because locusts will devour it. You will plant vineyards and cultivate them, because you will not drink the wine or gather the grapes, because worms will eat it. Okay, so the Israelites are still clearly in their land, too. So even the people that have been, the Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown. This just means that you're in other nations that are around Israel. You're in your general location. So you're worshiping the Babylonian gods, the Assyrian gods, the idols in there. You're not, again, doing the transatlantic slave trade, because Christianity is the God. And that is the fulfillment of the Bible. So we know that that's not what God's talking about. And as we go back down, we see they're still in their land. They're planting vineyards. Locusts are devouring their crops. They still have their olive trees. You will have olive trees throughout your country, but you will not use the oil, because the olives will drop off. And this is just a quick run through. I took more time on the last breakdown, so I'm just continuing to run through this. You will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them, because they will go into captivity. Okay, so this is where they're going to try to, we're trying to give these guys a chance. There's 31,000 verses in the Bible, 31,102 verses. So when you ask them to give you 5, and this is their main section where they say the curses are the reason they're the Israelites, they're going to have to try to pick something here. And of the first 26 verses, there's nothing. So they're going to try to figure out a way to make this work for themselves, to be one of the 5. Let's see if it fits, though. especially remembering we have Jeremiah 11:8 and Daniel 9:11 through 14. You will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them because they will go into captivity. Swarms of locusts will take over all your trees and the crops of your land. Okay, so your sons and daughters are getting taken, but you're not. You're still in your land because you still have your crops, and the locusts are messing up your crops. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you, higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. Okay, so you're still in your native land. Your sons and daughters are in captivity. But this isn't the transatlantic slave trade again, because you are in your land where foreigners are rising above you, and your crops are getting destroyed by locusts. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. All these curses will come on you. When God says all these curses will come on you, he's not messing around. He means it. He means all these curses. So that means that in Jeremiah 11:8, all the curses came. And that's why God said all these curses will come on you. And Jeremiah said all the curses came. Because all the curses did come. And they came in years prior to 600 BC. Because that's the time Jeremiah the prophet and Daniel were prophets. They were around 600 BC-ish. So you could say that these people that are saying they're Israelites are only 2,000 years off because they claim the curses came in the 1400s after Jesus Christ, which is just amazing because it totally destroys the entire context of what God did by sending Jesus Christ to save the world, saying that these curses are still relevant. But that's a whole nother breakdown that is obvious, obviously. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. They will be a sign and wonder to you and your descendants forever, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity. All right. Therefore, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. You will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. Oh, okay, we finally got something, right? We got something. This is where we're going to use the metaphor. We know Egypt is a metaphor for slavery. We're going to say Egypt's a metaphor for slavery, but we're going to make iron yoke not a metaphor. We're going to make that literal, because we know when Solomon's son Rehoboam was asked, what's the type of yoke he should put on the people, and his advisors told him to put a, whatever yoke. I mean, we could find that, the verse of Rehoboam where I don't want to get off this, but we'll look for that at a different time. But we all know that Jesus says he has a gentle yoke, and an iron yoke is obviously referring to strict rule. And it's not talking about that device that is put on people in slavery, which is just an insane distortion if you think about it, that people are trying to say that the iron yoke refers to a device that is literally on somebody's neck, because it's saying until he has destroyed you. So those devices aren't on you to kill the person at the time. This iron yoke on your neck is talking about a burden on a people. And we'll read the whole verse again. Therefore, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand. A fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or for the young. Okay, so again, we're going to try to figure out, is this eagle swooping nation America? They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. So this is this is the same nation. This is them. They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new olive oil, new wine, no grain, new wine or olive oil, nor any calves of your herds or lambs of your flocks until you are ruined. So that nation that came like an eagle, that's putting that iron yoke on you, the nation that's putting an iron yoke on you, putting you into poverty, they're swooping down like an eagle. a nation from far away, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. They're going to devour the young of your livestock. So how is this the transatlantic slave trade if they're devouring your livestock and the crops of your land? And it even says of your land. So this nation that's swooping down like an eagle, that's putting an iron yoke on you, this isn't talking about a picture of a guy with a weird metal iron thing around his neck in America doing slavery. God isn't using these crazy metaphors to portray that. He's using this as a ruthless nation using an iron yoke on your neck, swooping like an eagle from the ends of the earth, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. So you're getting destroyed in your land. You're not getting destroyed in a foreign land. You're getting destroyed in your land where your crops are and your livestock are. They will leave you no grain, new wine or olive oil, nor any calves of your herds. So with these cows and these lambs of your flocks, see, it says calves of your herds or lambs of your flocks until you are ruined. Were the calves and the lambs that this nation that swooped down like an eagle that put an iron yoke on you, were they on the slave ships? Were they sending the cows and the lambs over? From what I saw in historical data, they were just packing slaves onto ships. They didn't have cows and lambs on the ships. And it sure looks like, because they're destroying the crops and the livestock of your land, that they're talking about the land of Israel. But let's see if the next verse or the next couple verses help clarify. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land. Oh, again, the eagle swooping nation from verse 49 and the iron yoke nation from verse 48. If we read in context down to 52, from 51 we see your land, the crops and the cows, the livestock, and the lambs and the calves. Then we see in 52, they're laying siege to all the cities of throughout your land. Again, not the transatlantic slave trade, your land, until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall. So you have high fortified walls to try to protect you from this eagle swooping nation with an iron yoke. How is that the transatlantic slave trade? They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. Because of the suffering, your enemy, and this part is the most important aspect. If you want to put everything into context and understand what is the most important aspect of why this isn't the transatlantic slave trade, and why that eagle swooping nation and that iron yoke doesn't refer to American slavery, is because you just read verse 53. And God's telling you the consequence of what that nation did. I mean, it's pretty clear with your land in 52 and 51 too. So, I mean, we don't even need 53 to prove this point. But, I mean, the point is brought home in 53 completely by, because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of the sons and the daughters the Lord your God has given you. And again, that's in Ezekiel 5. I'll have to do a separate study on that because this video is getting long and I don't want to spend too much time on that. But you can just look in Ezekiel 5 and also see in Lamentations how the Israelites were eating their young. And it was something that was the last resort that God said it never crossed his mind and it'll never cross it again. So it only happened once. And that just proves to you that these curses all were fulfilled. All were fulfilled before the time of Jeremiah and Daniel, and it happened also in Ezekiel. So continue on. Even the most gentle, and this is just about more of the children getting eaten. We have these next 4 verses. Even the most gentle and sensitive man among you will have no compassion on his own brother or the wife he loves or his surviving children. And he will not give to one of them any of the flesh of his children that he is eating. It will be all he has left because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of all the cities, of all your cities. Again, the siege of all your cities. They're eating their children in the land of Israel that is getting sieged, in all of their cities, not in a foreign land. The most gentle, and this isn't America doing this to them. That eagle doesn't represent America. I know that sounds good to some people, but not to people that actually think and do exegesis. The most gentle and sensitive woman among you, so sensitive and gentle that she would not venture to touch the ground with the sole of her foot, will begrudge the husband she loves and her own son or daughter. All right, we're going to finish up here. After birth from her womb and the children she bears, for in her dire need she intends to eat them secretly because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of your cities. If you do not carefully follow all the words of this law which are written in this book, and do not revere this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, Jesus Christ, and the Father God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Lord will send fearful plagues on you and your descendants, harsh and prolonged disasters, and severe lingering illnesses. He will bring on you all the diseases of Egypt that you have dreaded, and they will cling to you. The Lord will also bring on you every kind of sickness and disaster not recorded in the book of the law until you are destroyed, not recorded in this book of the law until you are destroyed. You who are as numerous as the stars in the sky will be left but few in number because you did not obey the Lord your God. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations, from one end of the earth to the other. There you will worship other gods. So this is real important, because when you ask them for the 5 verses, this is going to be one of the verses they'll bring up. And like I said, it makes absolutely no sense to bring it up, because it tells you when you're getting scattered among all the nations from one end to the earth to the other, there you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. So if you're claiming you're an Israelite because this is one of your 5 verses out of the 31,102 verses in the Bible, this was one of the best 5 verses you could find. You got to tell me why the transatlantic slave trade was using idols and not Christianity, because I thought that was very, very prominent, that everybody in the transatlantic slave trade was forcing on these black people Christianity and was manipulating the Bible and using Christianity to tell them that slavery was good, because we do know that they were doing that. And that is what they exactly were doing. They were perverting Christianity to justify slavery and evil. So this verse doesn't fit. Yeah, you got scattered to among all the nations and from one end to the earth to the other, but you're missing, just like in Deuteronomy 28:68, you're missing the other half of the verse that puts it together, because there you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. And I don't think Jesus Christ, the Son of God that God sacrificed, is being described as a foreign god, worship other gods and gods of wood and stone to the Father, and Jesus being the Word. I don't think he's describing himself as gods of wood and stone. So where's your argument? You can't use this as one of your 5 verses. So we're on verse 64 from Deuteronomy 28:15-64. Which one of these verses fits? The eagle swooping down didn't fit. The yoke around the iron yoke doesn't fit. I know people are really simple and want to just say, oh, iron yoke, that means that contraption that's iron around somebody's neck. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, when you see when God's talking about a yoke and using an iron yoke, that's clearly a metaphor for a heavy yoke. It's not talking about an actual metal contraption. Okay? So among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary with longing, and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread both day and night, never sure of your life. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening, and in the evening, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. And let's end it with the very last curse that they claim proves they're Israelites. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. So again, all you got to do is change God's word. He used slaves here. I mean, that's what bondmen and bondwomen meant in the King James Version. They were just speaking Shakespeare, crazy vernacular, but slaves is in the verse. And you got a location, Egypt. You can change it to the metaphor. You can lie. You can change the word of God. That's your choice. You wanna turn iron yoke into a metal contraption around somebody's neck. Go ahead, lie there. Then you can turn Egypt into a metaphor. But you still have a problem by doing that because the rest of the verse says that you're basically coming to a place where you're trying to sell yourself because you have no food in your land and your crops have been destroyed and your whole life is your cattle, everything's been plundered. It's basically saying you're trying to sell yourself as a slave, but no one will buy you. And even in the King James Version that has different crazy vernacular language, if you still use common sense, but no one will buy you, that clearly implies that you're offering yourself to be bought. Because if no one will buy you, it really does imply that you're offering yourself to be bought. But again, that's our Deuteronomy 28:68 and Deuteronomy 28:15 through 68. That's a breakdown of every curse. Everything that they claim proves they're an Israelite. And yeah, we'll do a show with any of these guys. We'll put the link in the chat and we'll put this title up. We'll ask for the 5 verses. They got 31,102 options in this Bible I own and you own. It's got 66 books with 783,137 words. And they could go to it and they could just pick 5 verses out of 31,102. I don't know if we want to do the percentage on that, but it's not 1%. So if you can't use 5 verses out of 31,000, are you an Israelite? Are you going to keep lying? You're going to be before God one day. You're going to die, and he's going to judge you. Do you think you're going to be able to lie to God? If you can't show other human beings with the word of God 5 verses that are truthful, that describe you as an Israelite because you're black, because you're a Latino, because you're a Native American. And let me be clear, I don't see many Native Americans going around doing what these guys do, these groups, these cults. I'm not going to put Native Americans even in that slander. I'm not going to say they're slandering God and using the Bible to make themselves better than other people, superior to other people, and to talk down to other people, because I don't see many Native Americans in these groups. But if you're black, if you're a Latino, and we'll say Native American because they allow them in their groups, but if you're black, Latino, or Native American, and you're in these groups, are you going to be able to lie to God? Are you going to be able to show any other human being 5 verses? Just 5. I just went through all the curses in Deuteronomy 28:15 through 68. I didn't see anything that applies. Is there any other part of the Bible that has curses that apply? We know there's no part of the Bible that gives physical descriptions of Israelites. So if there's no physical descriptions of the Israelites, what are you using to say black, Latino, and Native American? You're using the curses, right? There's no physical description elsewhere. I wish I was good at editing because I'd put Captain Tazariak, I'd edit him in right here where he answers my question and he says there's no place where the Israelites are considered described by God. So, anyways, we have to wrap this one up. I mean, I've beat it to death. It's obvious. We'll look into the children being eaten in Ezekiel 5 and in Lamentations and other books. but it's really clear in Ezekiel 5. But that fulfills the curses, folks. And you can always go to Jeremiah 11:8 and Daniel 9:11 through 14 just to show these people that all the curses were brought 2,000 years before they claimed they were. Not only that, Jesus Christ was brought to save the world, not to condemn the world, but to save the world. So these curses were parts of the Bible that were prior. They don't apply to people today. It's shameful that people try to use those curses to claim they're Israelites. Find some better information. Stop lying. You guys are popping up everywhere. This is like a plague. You need to stop it. You need to start showing people at least 5 verses to prove you're an Israelite. That's why I'm starting this challenge, because I want to show people how pathetic it is that they don't have 5 verses to show they're Israelites. I'm not asking for 50, 500, or 5,000 of the 31,000 verses. I'm asking for 5 verses. So that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed the content as usual. I hope this edifies people. I hope people start to see the truth. I hope people that are in these groups stop lying to themselves, stop lying to God. And if you truly love God, repent, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Begin by worshiping Jesus and the Father and loving thy neighbor like thyself. And repent for everything you've done in these groups where you've broken loving thy neighbor. God bless and take care. Till next time.